So here we are finally in week 12, and we are talking about family and sociology of families. If we were all together, one of the first activities I would have you do is actually sit with your group and write a definition of family. And then we'll go around the room and read them. And it's always been so heartwarming and amazing to hear about love and support and care. You don't hear a lot about biology always. You hear, about people and choice, and just you get to really see the power and uniqueness in the word family. And so we've talked in this class about family in a few different ways so far, and we've talked about it and analyzed it in a smaller micro level way. But we've also thought of family as the institution that it is, right? And so the family, and that's what I want to discuss now for a minute, is the societal functions of the family. So this is what the family provides for society. The first one is economic production. So, two different ways. First of all, children are raised to grow up to be workers in our economy. The second way that economic production and the family work together in society is that families need a lot of stuff. So, a lot of economic production takes place on behalf of the family. Next is protection. So if we were all together in the classroom, I would say, okay, imagine if somebody walked in the door, we don't know them, and they had a 2-month-old baby and a car seat carrier, right? They carefully put the car seat carrier down on the ground and they walk out. At the end of class, could we all just kind of leave and be like, bye, baby, and close the door and the baby would be fine? No. And I want you to think about, what age would you say that we would feel comfortable, like walking out of the classroom and being like, well, they'll be okay. And so a lot of times when I pose that question, my students will say kind of maybe 12, but 13, 14, 15 years old or so would be, when you would feel like a child, or, the young teenager could be safe and independent in our society. That's a lot of years of protecting our young. And so that's one of the things family provides. Socialization of children. Family teaches you all the different things that you need to do to navigate society, to interact with others. We're going to be talking about sibling socialization soon. We're going to be talking about how family and gender socialization works. And so we're going to be kind of delving into that in the next couple of weeks or so. Care of ill and aging family members. So, a few weeks back, as you know, we covered the second shift and all of the care work that gets done in families. Well, some people have actually conceptualized this as the third shift, because so many families are in a position where they are caring for another aging or family member dealing with possibly a long term illness. As people have, researched longevity, as we are living longer, they've started to really think through the mathematics of my generation, your generation, possibly future generations could be helping and caring for parents almost as long as we even raise children. And you've got to think, what's the number of years that we consider it takes to raise a child? It's, usually 18. So there's an inordinate amount of care work that is done on behalf of society that families are doing. So it's, again, it's unpaid labor, but it's a crucial aspect of what society needs. It needs every member taken care of, and so families are providing that. Recreation. A lot of times, if we're spending our downtime together, it's with people in our family. We celebrate holidays with people in our family, things along those lines. Don't always think of sexual control, but by virtue of our definition of who is a family member, that's offering an element of sexual control, cousins and so on and so forth. That kind of definition is not always present in, for instance, like the animal kingdom. And so thinking about how definitions of family provide an element of sexual control. And then finally, reproduction. Society needs people, right? And there are some countries, Northern European countries and such, that in the last several years have really started to see that birth rates are dropping off significantly. And that's going to impact their population pyramid. If they end up with a larger percentage of the population that is older and aging and retired and needing medical care and all these things, and they don't have as many people that are able to be workers and be paying into a tax base and things along those lines, it can end up being a very precarious situation for a country. And so some countries have actually tried to incentivize people in their families, in their society, to have more children. So incentivize by paying for like paid family leave that the government is paying for, or an extra tax break and paid family leave, things along those lines, because they can see how crucial and dire it may be if people do not end up having, um, two children. Because a lot of times, when you start, like families have less than two people, you can end up with a precariously balanced population. Okay, continuing our conversation about family structures. We have that traditional family structure, right? The nuclear family, that's a very heteronormative structure still. But no matter what, even getting away from heteronormativity, it's usually a nuclear family is two parents. It's what, like 2.3 kids, that kind of idea of, what they I don't know. I don't know if I want to use the word traditional. It's not quite right. I certainly don't want to use the word quintessential, but that kind of the norm that we still refer to, even though that's not the way our families are shaped in many, many ways. But it's still kind of what we point to somewhat in our society. Other aspects of family structure nowadays, we have marriage equality. We have. Many more marriages that are recognized legally. We have some more respect for relationships. That does not necessarily mean that our society is, that we have erased prejudice and discrimination in any which way, but we are in a place with marriage equality and understanding of the definition of marriage and family that we were not, a handful 10 years ago or so. There's single parent families. I was raised in a single parent family, as I've shared a little bit. I know many, many of my students have been. We have blended families. So when there's remarriage and there's step siblings and things along those lines, we have individuals who are married and decide, or even just long term relationships, couples decide not to have children, or individuals decide not to have children. And then you have people who grapple with infertility. I will be honest, Sean and I have actually grappled with infertility. It's something a lot of times that you can't talk about, right? There's a lot of times that like society acts like it's, you should be embarrassed or ashamed, or nobody wants to hear it, or it's uncomfortable. And so it's unfortunate that a lot of times people who are dealing with infertility feel like there's not really a place necessarily to talk about it. I want you to think about your family tree, and I know we didn't get to hand it in, but that idea of, families come in all different shapes and sizes and things along those lines, and the uniqueness that you found within your family. A couple unique aspects of my family. I've been co parenting with Mac's dad. Mac's dad is my boyfriend from high school, right? I had Mac when I was 20. And so that idea that Mac has grown up in two families brought together. Mac's dad and I were never married, but we have always been able to, even though it's been a struggle at times, bring together a cohesive family. It's also a multicultural family. Mac has gone growing up back and forth between my house with, Sean, Mac, and I. And then his dad's family is this awesome, boisterous, loving, multi generational Filipino family. So Mac would navigate, different food, different, I mean, he would have, or she, sorry, historical Mac still will trip me up on the pronouns. So she would have Nai and Lolo, like great grandparents and multi generations, and longanisa and rice for breakfast, and just in a completely different experience in these two homes that she consistently shared with parents, and she had three parents. The other interesting thing I think that has made a creative dynamic, shall we say, in my family is I have a sister. I am 43, almost 44. I have a sister who's turning 15 next month. So I'm what, like 27, 28 years 29 years. I can't think of the math right now. I am a full grown adult, older than she is. And so that's also very interesting because, like, Bailey, my 15-year-old sister, had brother in laws before she was even born. And she has, a nephew and nieces that are just younger than her. And Mac is older than her. And so I want you to think about, where you might have interesting connections in your family, which is why I share a couple of interesting ones in mine. Okay, let's talk just a little bit about parenting. So I have a quick question. Are children, in your perception, wildflowers that develop naturally? So, think about wildflowers. They need sun, they need water, they need space. Or is it like tending to a garden where you are micromanaging and making lots and lots of decisions about what's best? Sean and I grow a tomato garden every summer. And so, what tomatoes are we going to grow and what's the best way to grow them, that kind of thing. A lot of times when I pose this question, students kind of sit there and they're like, well, it's both. And I can definitely see both sides of that argument. One of the theorists that we cover in this class, much like Arlie Hochschild with Second Shift, where this is like seminal work in family theory, is Annette Lareau. Previous to Annette Lareau's work, there was a lot of focus, understandably and truly, on the fact that race, ethnicity, culture can shape the way that parents choose to raise their kids. But Annette Lareau did research that really showed also how socioeconomic status can matter so very much. So I want to take you through her typology. It's two different ways of parenting children. And so there's concerted cultivation, which is middle class families. And so this is all about analyzing what's the best way to maximize a child's abilities. And a lot of time that's done with extracurriculars like soccer teams and art classes and ballet and all those things. And a lot of times it's done with parents really treating children like with elements of equality and discussions and negotiations and really thinking through, well, what do you want? And like, for instance, if a child is playing video games and it's 8 o'clock at night and it's time to go to bed and a parent says, you know what, it's time to go to bed. You need to turn that off. The child will be, oh no, can I just finish this one level and then I promise I'll brush my teeth quickly? That idea of negotiation. And quite honestly, being raised like that can go awry. Annette Lareau is good at, not immediately like endorsing middle class is just the best, right? She says there's a couple real issues with concerted cultivation. One is that it can instill a really significant problematic sense of entitlement, the kind of I deserve this mentality in children, clear through growing up as adults, which can be problematic when they need to be out there operating in the world and have people, agree and be on their side. When you alienate people by being kind of jerky and having that sense of entitlement, that doesn't work. The other thing is extracurricular activities. When a child goes from one thing to another and they never really get downtime to be creative and just be a kid and be like figure it out, that can be really, really detrimental too. So then you have accomplishment of natural growth. In concerted cultivation, I didn't point out before, that's the garden, right? You saw that neatly manicured image of the garden. Here you have the image of just wildflowers. Both are absolutely beautiful. So wildflowers growing out in the hills. And so now we're talking about families who are kind of in the same vein that when we did the game of life activity. Families who are working very, very hard to provide the needs of their family, so shelter and food and things of that sort. And you love a child, you feed a child, you care for a child, you support a child grows. So they view childhood as happening kind of naturally, that it doesn't need to be hugely analyzed and micromanaged. And there's not always the resources for all of those kinds of extracurricular activities. One of the things with accomplishment of natural growth is that, what the parent says goes. So let's go back to that video game example. Like, it's 8 o'clock, kids playing a video game, it's time to go to bed. And so, okay, you need to stop playing then, it's time to go to bed. Well, when a kid goes, well, but mom, why? Or dad, why? What's the answer? I didn't stop talking. I was giving you a second to think of the answer. Hopefully, some of you thought of it immediately, but why they whine? Because I said so. Do what I say, don't question me. My word goes, that's the way it is. That's what I mean by tending to use more directives. And then finally, the issue with this is that when no means no, when a child grows up to be an adult, when you hear no in, maybe with an educator or with a medical professional, and you just kind of shrug and go, well, they said there's nothing that can be done, that can be kind of problematic too. So it's not about having a sense of entitlement and making demands in any which way, because that doesn't work either, but kind of making sure that you have the skills to negotiate and or advocate for yourself. That can be something, that balance between the two can be really, really important. So that is a look at the parenting typology discovered and analyzed and developed by Annette Lareau. That is a few different structures of how family operates in our society and then what the family provides for our society as a whole.